Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. I'm Rick Husey. Today I'm going to be talking about I'm going to show a new survey that came out that gives an indication of when internet service providers that are providing service over a cable network, DOCSIS network, HFC, when they are thinking they might be transitioning to an all-fiber network. And that has changed significantly over the last year. We'll talk about that in just a second. Thanks for joining me for Broadband Deployment News. So again, there's this survey that came out from ATX, and they've done this the last couple of years, and it kind of gets the opinions of cable operators on what they plan on doing with technology like DOCSIS 4.0, and then also what their plans are with fiber, how they're planning on doing those things. And then I thought some of the most interesting information was when they plan on completely getting off of their HFC network and going to all fiber. So I was going to show that. First, though, before I did that, I wanted to go just look at this article here that was from last month, because this gives a kind of a rundown on just from one provider, Altus USA. So you see here, Altus USA won't ditch HFC just yet. Despite its accelerated drive to overbuild fiber lines throughout its regions, Altus USA has no plans to junk its legacy hybrid fiber coax network anytime soon. So HFC is a technology that cable operators have been using for years, where they're mixing coax and fiber. So they come out of their head end and they try to go fiber as far as they can, as close as they can as the customer. They've been trying to inch that out closer and closer to the customer over the years to improve reliability, improve the ability to provide faster speeds. And they're getting to the point now where they're trying to get to fewer and fewer amplifiers in the process and getting to maybe node plus 1, node plus 0 as they're doing this. So that's the fiber portion of things. They've been trying to increase that, again, because of increased reliability. But then there's that last mile that's the challenge. So fiber operators today are building fiber to greenfield places, in places where they don't currently have plant. They found that they're already doing fiber most of the way in all other kinds of areas. So they realized that they can go fiber all the way to the customer if there's not already their existing infrastructure there, because it's cheaper, easier to maintain. And the problem is that last mile if they've already got plant there, because once you try to overbuild that plant, it's very expensive, because then you've got the issues of getting that fiber all the way to the customer. You've got the customer premise equipment. You've got interrupting, service interruptions as you make those changes. It's very difficult. So most today, what most cable operators are doing is they're going fiber in greenfield areas, and then they're looking at strategically upgrading, or I should say migrating, their HFC plant to all fiber in certain areas. And Altus sounds like they are actually doing quite a bit of overbuilding, but they're not in those areas where they've got two plants. They're saying they're not in any hurry to get rid of the HFC plant, even if they've got fiber plant running in the same area, or let's say where they can offer fiber to a customer. So if a customer's on DOCSIS cable modem service, they have areas where they can offer fiber, but they're not rushing those customers to that. So you can see that here. Altus USA CFO Michael Grau, I guess, made that point clear last week, speaking at the JP Morgan Global Technology, Media and Communications Conference in New York. Grau said that the nation's third largest MSO intends to keep its cable plant intact, even as it continues to expand fiber to the home aggressively throughout its territories over the next few years. So that's what they're saying today. Grau explained that Altus USA is in no hurry to ditch its legacy HFC plant, because it would take some time to migrate all its current HFC subscribers over to the new fiber networks. So far, the operator has focused on recruiting new subscribers for its fiber networks, not switching current subscribers. So where they have deployed fiber in their existing areas, it sounds like what they're doing is focusing on getting new subscribers and trying to get them to join up and sign up with the fiber service. So they're not going to be putting new customers, I would imagine, on the HFC plant. They're putting them on the fiber network. They're not taking a lot of time right now to go out to the existing customers and say, hey, we want to switch you from cable to fiber. They may change their mind as they get more fiber customers on and they start to dwindle the number of HFC customers, and eventually they would close down that HFC plant. But he says it doesn't look like that's going to be anytime soon. He says there's no point in shutting down the HFC network, or he said, noting that it costs the operator the relatively small sum of $60 million a year to power that network. I don't see a justification for us shutting down the HFC network. Grau said the real operational savings of switching to fiber come from slashing customer service costs by reducing the need for truck rolls and other interventions. So that is a big part of it. So when you go all fiber to the customer, again, the more fiber you have in your network, the more reliable it's going to be. And then if you can get that all the way to the curb, that helps as well. But there is that last mile that's very expensive to switch out. So that's why they're not really focusing on that now. But there is a big difference in, for example, RF troubleshooting on a fiber network versus a all fiber network versus an HFC network, because you've got anywhere that you've got that coax in there, you can have all kinds of issues with loose connectors and cuts in cables and other things that can cause issues. He reiterated previous assertions by MSO officials that customer service expenses are 30% to 40% lower for fiber customers than HDC subscribers because they require much fewer repair calls and new consumer premises equipment, or new CPE. He estimated that the company could slice that plant maintenance figure in half by going full fiber and foregoing any additional capacity upgrades on its legacy HFC network. Even with those projected cost savings, though, Grau doesn't believe it makes sense to junk the HFC networks anytime soon. I don't see a path where we shut down the HFC network necessarily, he said. The operator, which had built out fiber to more than 1.3 million locations by the end of Q1 2022, aims to boost that total about 6.5 million locations by the close of 2025. The operator, which closed out the winter quarter with 81,000 fiber subs, is seeking to pad that total to 200,000 by the end of the year. Grau made the case that this total should start climbing faster as Altus USA pivots from simply adding new subscribers to its fiber lines to more aggressively enticing its current HFC subs to switch to fiber. We've gotten much more proactive in the last 3 to 4 weeks, he said. I think we'll see fiber migration accelerate now. So he's saying they're not going to do this anytime soon, but he's also saying that, hey, the last few weeks we've started to accelerate this, so who knows how this might change. And it's changing quickly. So the survey that I'm going to show here kind of bears that out. So this is a survey report. It's called the 2050 Project. It's from ATX, I believe an equipment provider for DOCSIS. They could have fiber stuff as well. But so it says here, 2050 Project charting the HFC evolution. This is the 2022 edition. I did a broadcast on Tech Tuesday about this maybe about a year ago, because I did the 2021 report. And it was really kind of striking the difference between the 2021 report and the 2022 report, which they noticed as well, because there's places in here where they're comparing the 2021 numbers and the 2022 numbers. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I just want to highlight a few areas where it's specifically talking about cable operators' plans on migrating, completely migrating off of their HFC network, or their plans, for example, their plans for DOCSIS 4.0, which can be something that can forestall the need to upgrade, or I should say migrate to fiber. So again, I'm going to buzz through some of this, but you see here that this year's survey includes the opinions of 87 cable industry professionals representing nearly 60 companies. So it's a pretty good survey. It's pretty broad. It's also, you can see geographically where they're located here. So you've got most of them, 84% in North America, with 74% of that being in the US. And you've got a small number down here in Central America, South America, and in the European, Europe, Africa, I guess not so much Asia here, so in that area. So I'm going to cover some of these questions. So here's one. Please select the response that best represents the number of homes passed in your service area. So this gives you an idea of the diversity of these providers as far as how big they are. And again, they have a pretty good spread here. So if you look, you can see there are some representing below 1,000, about 9%. And there's a lot of cable operators out there that are that size. A surprising number, let's say, that are covering small towns, but that's a good percentage for that number. And then they've got a really good percentage in the middle here. So you got 1,000 to almost 10,000, let's just say under 10,000, 14%. And then 10,000 to about 100,000, 31%. So right there, you've got a lot of good mid-sized providers. And you've also got the really big guys, starting here at 23%, 100,000 to 1 million, and then they've got 23% above 1 million. So it's a pretty good mix between your really big guys to your middle to small guys, and as far as who's representing these numbers. And then as far as the key findings, 3/4 of the respondents representing larger service providers say they agree, 40%, or strongly agree, 35%, with the statement that they will migrate to DOCSIS 4.0 as soon as supporting equipment is available. While 40% of cable professionals surveyed remain unsure over which flavor of DOCSIS to adopt, 31% indicated they prefer FDD, that's full division duplexing, I think, but it's the same thing as extended spectrum DOCSIS, and then FDX, which is full duplex. So those are two flavors of how to increase the capacity on the cable network, and then full duplex obviously being able to offer symmetrical speeds. So 31% going for the easier path of FDD, and 16% saying they prefer the little harder path, I think, with full duplex. But again, a lot of them, 40%, were unsure. Almost all, 95% of cable professionals, believe to some degree that it is important for cable operators to offer 1 gig symmetrical services to be competitive with fiber to the home providers. And you'll see that that's increased quite a bit. Only 7% of survey takers believe they will still be operating HFC networks more than 20 years into the future, a decline of 24% from the 21 survey. So in the 2021 survey, it looked like a lot of people were saying, yeah, it could take us 30 years. That's why they're calling this the 2050 project. It could take us 30 years before we get off of our HFC plant. Well, that has shrunk down. So it declined 24% as far as those who think it will take more than 20 years. I'm going to skip some of this frequency stuff. They talk about the higher frequency, the 1.8 gigahertz. That's going to let people get faster speeds and provide, especially on the upstream. I'm going to skip all of that. I will link where you can download this report at the end of this broadcast if you're interested, and if you're a cable operator or even a fiber operator, you're probably interested in seeing what these cable operators think. So I will link to that at the end. What else do we have of interest here? Okay, so DOCSIS 4.0 gains momentum, question mark, right? Is it gaining momentum? Here's a question I wanted to cover. So select the response that best matches your agreement with the statement, my company will begin to adopt DOCSIS 4.0 as soon as supporting technology becomes available. So there's DOCSIS 4.0 is kind of a mixture of things. Like I mentioned, there's the full duplex component, there's extended spectrum DOCSIS, there's other things that you need to do in order to get to DOCSIS 4.0 that were not necessarily DOCSIS 4.0, like distributed access architecture, where you're going to, again, getting fiber deep, where you're going to put maybe remote PHY or remote MAC PHY out in the plant. So a lot of people have been doing those kinds of things, but as far as these other supporting technologies like maybe full duplex and DOCSIS 4.0 devices, those kinds of things, how likely are they to adopt that when that stuff becomes available? Well, you can see here in 2021, 49% strongly agreed or agreed that they were going to be doing that, and that's jumped to 75% now in 2022 that they strongly agree or agree that as soon as this technology becomes available, they will begin to adopt that. Some of that would be due to the fact, I would think, that we're closer to having that equipment, that technology available right now. And then also, again, we'll see this, pressure from competitors on the fiber side, and they've got to make choices. Do I start deploying fiber and ripping out my my HFC plant and putting in fiber, or do I try to make the most out of my HFC plant, which will probably cost them less? So they're kind of weighing those things right now. Excuse me. Let's see, let's get past that. I didn't want to see that, right? No. What do we got here? Split decisions. Yeah, I'm going to pass all this. This is about whether to do mid splits and high splits. Again, trying to make the most out of the spectrum that they have and expanding that. I'm going to scroll down to, where was it? Not much further. Competitive threats. Let's see here. I think I had something on this. Yeah. So competitive threat, along with customer demand, is one of those variables identified earlier in this document that can significantly impact how quickly cable operators evolve their HFC network. So again, this would be whether they deploy DOCSIS 4.0 technologies to increase speeds and maybe even get symmetrical service, or whether they migrate to fiber. In the past year, cable operators have grown increasingly aware of the long-term threat from fiber providers. How much of a long-term competitive threat do you consider fiber to the home providers? So you can see 2021 and 2022 numbers, and it's pretty striking here that in these two categories, and I put these numbers in here just so we have the totals. So you got somewhat of a threat or significant threat, 52% in 2021, 10% thought no threat at all, and that has jumped quite a bit. So you got 89% now, somewhat of a threat to a significant threat, and 0% thought there was no threat at all. So obviously their opinions on this have shifted in the last year. And this would be due to the fact that so many people now are, high on fiber and really trying to get that deployed as quickly as possible. It's got to do with the telephone companies, a lot of the telephone companies, the old telcos migrating to fiber. That would be AT&T. It's got, I'm sure, probably got to do with other things, even just like 5G, but it's because of so much emphasis on fiber. And as more people migrate to that or deploy that, then you've got more advertising out there that's talking about how much better it is, right? So that's another thing that they're seeing. Competitively, how important is your ability to offer your subscribers 1 gig symmetrical services? And this was quite a change here as well. So in 2021, extremely important to important, 52%. And then that changed to 79% here in 2022. And this, for me, is still I don't want to call it a marketing gimmick, but it's still really a marketing checkbox for me, because you really don't need, if you're going to offer somebody a gig service, you don't need to offer gig up and down. Gig down, okay, that's great, because you're going to be getting lots of data coming your way. But as far as data going in the other direction, there's much, much less of that. So having it symmetrical, especially when you've got a gig, it's not necessarily needed. If you had a gig by half a gig, that people would be thrilled with that, and they would not need anywhere near that on the upstream. So again, I see this as kind of a marketing gimmick, but as they say, perception is reality. So the more that you see fiber operators out there, competitively on a national scale or even locally, talking about symmetrical service and how that needs to be where the bar is, then the more pressure cable operators are going to feel to be getting to that point, even if it's not really needed. Because again, who really needs a gig? Most people don't need a gig, but yet if you say you have gig and it's symmetrical, those are two things that sound better, right? If you've got a cable operator, let's say, offering 500 by 250, that is more than sufficient for most people. Then you've got a fiber operator in the same area saying you get gig symmetrical for the same price, let's say. Well, that's a competitive issue, even if it's not really going to be speed-wise any better for that customer. Now, reliability-wise, there certainly could be a difference, because fiber is going to be more reliable. Because again, it's just easier to maintain that fiber plant. Once it's in, there's not a lot of changes. You obviously can have fiber cuts and you can get dirty fiber that can cause degraded service, but it's not like an RF plant where, again, a loose connector, get some water in there, or a squirrel chew, this kind of thing. We can have a squirrel chew on fiber, but I think they're less likely to do that. But your reliability on fiber is going to be higher. Let's see. The $1 trillion U.S. infrastructure bill passed in November allocates $65 billion for broadband spending. Please select the option that best matches your expectations concerning the distribution of funds. So this is their opinion on where they think the money is going to go. And you can see here they think 16% cable operators will benefit more than fiber or wireless providers. And I don't know why they would say that. Funding will equally benefit cable, fiber, and wireless providers. So they're being optimistic there that it's going to be allocated pretty equally. And this is all going to be dependent upon the state, because this money is going from the NTI to the states, and then the states determine where it goes. But the NTI is definitely putting a thumb on the scale for fiber. So because of that, you will see, just based on scoring, you're going to see if fiber is available, then that's going to be a more likely option. Now, if you've got a cable operator that's providing, really fast service, then they've obviously going to have a competitive situation there as well. But I think fiber is going to be the ones that are most likely going to be getting the money. So you see here, fiber and wireless providers will benefit more than cable operators. There's 30% that think that. Fiber providers will benefit the most, only 15%. I would peg that a lot higher if I were answering this survey. And then entities other than cable, fiber, or wireless providers, such as municipalities and cooperatives, will benefit the most. And it's 11%. So that question is not really worded in a way where that is telling us anything, because municipalities and cooperatives will be deploying fiber, right? So whether you are an existing provider or you're a new provider, like a municipality or a co-op, and you're deploying fiber, that should really be in the same bucket. So this number would be encompassed, I think, in here in the fiber providers. Let's see here. Disparities in the speed and availability of broadband, the so-called digital divide, seem to have been magnified by COVID-related WFH policies. I should have looked that up beforehand. I'm not sure what that is. Please rate the importance of addressing this problem. Well, anyway, so yeah, we've known from COVID and the pandemic how the digital divide has just become more apparent to us, I think, as people, before weren't necessarily needing a fixed wired connection at home. They were able to do stuff on their phone, and they were fine, or they could go to work and school and take care of things there. But then suddenly everybody was home, and the phone connection just wasn't doing it. Or they had a DSL line at home, but they weren't really exercising that much. They weren't doing Zoom calls and for school and work and that kind of thing, and just streaming entertainment. So it became apparent. So it's interesting here. Medium priority and low priority adds up to 35% in this chart. And you might be wondering, well, why is that not important? We all saw it was a problem. I think the reason is because cable operators responded very well and were able to handle the increased demand very well, because they already had very robust networks, just like a fiber operator would have had a robust network. But there were a lot of networks out there that were not robust. It could have been wireless networks that were, let's say, not 5G, that were offering less than 100 megabits per second down and not very much up. DSL networks, especially those where you had long runs where the speeds were not good. So all those, that's where we really saw the issues, and this would be much more important to providers that did not respond well. But cable operators already were in a good position to be able to handle the increased demand. Plus, they were able to tweak some things on their upstream to be able to respond and have more upstream bandwidth available. So they were in a position to be able to handle that. And because of that, I think that might be why they say it's just kind of a medium to low priority, because they were already in good shape. That would be my guess. And then finally, the HFC endgame. So when does HFC, or hybrid fiber coax, go away according to these cable operators? Well, first, 10G. So Cable Lab's 10G initiative calls for 10 gigabits per second symmetrical services. 10G and DOCSIS 4.0 are kind of synonymous in a way. 10G was the initiative, or what Cable Labs was calling the initiative, to be able to get to a 10 gigabit per second symmetrical service, which is going to be very difficult to do 10 gig symmetrical on an HFC plant. With DOCSIS 4.0 and 1.8 gigahertz currently maxing out at 6 gigabits per second in the upstream, which is the most likely scenario for cable operators to fulfill the 10G promise. So what they're saying here is, even with DOCSIS 4.0, the fastest you could go would be 6 gigabits per second in the upstream. So maybe you could do 6 by 6, but not 10 by 10. Looks like 37% said spectrum increases beyond 1.8 gigahertz would do that. Keep an upper bandwidth at 1.8 gigahertz and layer in full duplex technology. And then I thought this was interesting: migrate the cable access network to PON, fiber to the home. So they're kind of including in here, I think, getting off of the HFC network and just doing fiber. And then no plans to offer 10G on the HFC network. And then I think this is the one that I found the most interesting, and how opinions have shifted. So considering the expense and logistical differences or difficulties associated with fiber builds, what would be the most aggressive time frame to completely replacing your HFC network with all fiber? So back in 2021, the 6 to 10 years category, or excuse me, 6 to 20 years, so this is encompassing both of these, was 60%. And then 21 to 30 years and beyond 30 years was 31%. So it was looking like almost a third were saying, yeah, it's going to be over 21 years. And even beyond, up to beyond 30 years. So for 2022, that really shifted. So now in the 6 to, let's say, 20 time frame, you've got 85% compared to 60%. And then 21 to 30 years, 7%, and nobody thinks it will be beyond 30 years. So that beyond 30 years dropped from 14% down to 0. And we see this 17% used to think that it would be 21 to 30 years, and that has dropped to 7%. So 7% right here. So that is a significant shift, as these operators are thinking what they need to do to be able to handle the demands that are coming toward them. And I think a lot of it has to do, again, with the competitive threat. These networks would probably be sufficient to handle a lot of the demand that would be coming for the next several years, but especially if they make these changes to their HFC networks. But I think a lot of them will not will not be taking the plunge for very long. I think we're going to see this. I bet in a year we will see this shift even further, because people like, as we saw in that story earlier with Altus, it's like, yeah, we don't plan on doing this soon, but hey, last couple of weeks we started to accelerate. You may be seeing that, especially as these fiber dollars start to flow and you get more people building fiber. I think we're going to start to see that. And I just want to read a few things here. So that survey participant universe in 2022 is not identical to the 2021 participant list. Could account, of course, for some degree of fluctuation in finding from year to year. So they're saying not all the same people answered the survey between the years, but they say such a dramatic shift in sentiment, though, seems to indicate an actual and measurable variation in MSOs' attitudes and expectations about the pace of the evolution of their HFC networks. But what's spurring this shift, they ask? One explanation could be the intensity of the uptick in awareness of competitive threats from alternative fiber and wireless providers. Considering the several examples of fiber build-outs gaining momentum in the past year featured earlier in this document, the belief that fiber is the future of broadband could be on the rise. I think we all know that fiber is the future of broadband. It's just a question of how quickly these cable operators can make an economic case to rip out what they have and put in fiber in its place. These findings could indicate that some MSOs are growing increasingly anxious about the ability of their HFC networks to hold off competitive challenges and meet customer demand deep into the future. But rising anxiousness among cable operators does not change the reality facing MSOs, that overbuilding millions of miles of coax is a monumentally lengthy and expensive task. Estimates and circumstances vary significantly, but a consensus of research indicates that overbuilding HFC networks with fiber is in most cases many times more expensive than extending the speed and bandwidth of existing HFC networks. On top of that, HFC expansion rather than replacement can be accomplished much more speedily than fiber overbuilds given the current projected shortages of labor. So they can get it done faster just by, again, tweaking various things. So again, if they're not doing like something like remote PHY or remote MAC-PHY, extended architecture. I can't remember the acronyms. There's too many acronyms floating through my head right now. So if they're not doing that, that's something that they can do. Again, they can go further fiber deep to increase the reliability of the plant as well as increase speeds, and then they can look at some of these other DOCSIS 4.0 kinds of things and do that. And I've heard from in a couple of places that could be a difference of maybe, let's say it's $1,000 or more per home pass to do fiber versus a couple $100 to upgrade your plant to be able to significantly increase the speeds. So that's what they're looking at. And when you take that difference, let's say it's $600, $800 or more per home pass to be able to do that, it's going to make more sense for them to kind of keep the HFC plant where it is for now, especially if they don't have a competitor right there. If they've got a fiber competitor coming in, that's where they're going to prioritize. Okay, we need to switch our HFC customers over to fiber to be able to resist this new fiber competitor coming in who's talking about symmetrical gig speeds. We need to be able to do that too. So that's going to be the difference there, I think, is they're starting to accelerate their thinking on this because they see what fiber has to offer for them: reliability, right, less cost for the subscribers, and then also the competitive threat. So they're seeing that across the board, but when it becomes real to them is when they are going to be considering really taking this on. So again, this will be interesting to see this report. If they do it again in a year, I expect the numbers to shift again. We'll see how dramatically that shifts. I think some of that will depend on just the success of fiber deployments and, again, overbuilding of competitors in their networks. And we're not going to see much of that. So there shouldn't be any funded overbuilding. So if these cable operators are providing service that's over 100 by 20, and they all can do that. If they've got an HFC plant, they can easily do that. So if they're doing that, they've got DOCSIS 3.1 in place, maybe looking at DOCSIS 4.0, even if they've got DOCSIS 3.0 in place, they can easily do that. So there shouldn't be any federal funds coming that would overbuild them. They don't need to be concerned about that because for BEAD, for example, they're going to be focusing on unserved and underserved. So that is at the very 100 by 20 is underserved. Anything over that is considered served. So we should not see any funds that are going to be going to competitors that would be deploying fiber in their area. It would only be somebody that's doing that on their own, that's self-funding it and saying, hey, we see some easy pickings here. But it's not that easy if it's a cable operator. It would be easier if it was, let's say, no service there, like maybe a wireless provider that's not able to upgrade that well, or maybe somebody who's got DSL that doesn't have the resource to be able to upgrade to fiber, that's where the easy pickings would be if somebody were going to self-fund fiber deployment. But where there's DSL right now, most of those providers are wanting to hold on to their territory, so they're already making the investment in their own plant to be able to get rid of the DSL and go to fiber there. So, all right, well, thanks for joining me. If this was interesting at all, go ahead and give me a like on the video. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, and then go ahead and ring the little bell so that you'll be notified when I'm live. I'll talk to you next time with broadband deployment news. Bye-bye.